So a new gun control bill has been introduced into Congress, and this is probably the worst national bill I've ever seen. It has everything. It has a rifle ban, a magazine ban, bans on suppressors, a 7-day waiting period, permits to purchase, and essentially just everything you could ever think of that a gun control person would want is in this bill. So we need to talk about this absurd bill that's being introduced and what we need to do to stop it. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think these types of national bans on rifles, magazines, suppressors, etc. are clearly unconstitutional, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Kershaw Knives. Kershaw makes some of the best of knives available on the market if you're looking for a quality EDC knife. I carry a Kershaw Iridium knife every single day for my EDC, and I cannot recommend their knives enough. And right now, if you order using the code YT20Scholar, you can get 20% off of your order and free shipping on orders of $50 or more. So head on over to Kershaw Knives, pick yourself up a quality EDC knife, and thank you again to Kershaw Knives for sponsoring this two-way content. So like I said in the intro, a new national gun control bill has now been introduced, and it's probably the worst bill that I've ever seen. This bill is called the Gun Violence Prevention and Community Safety Act of 2023. It has been introduced by the typical anti-gun crew that we know, Elizabeth Warren and then also Hank Johnson. This bill is 281 pages of pure unconstitutional BS, and it includes everything that an anti-gun person would ever want. Pretty much any gun control law that's ever existed or they ever want to push at a national level is included in this bill. And what's interesting is this bill comes on the heels of the Go Safe Act, which was recently shot down and went down in flames this last week. If you're not aware, the Go Safe Act was another bill that was attempting a national rifle and magazine ban, and it failed unanimous consent in the Senate and has little chance of passing right now. But in response, the anti-gunners decided to double down and put together a bill that is a comprehensive attack on the Second Amendment. Now, when I say this bill has every anti-gun law, I absolutely mean that. It has a national ban on so-called assault weapons, a ban on magazines, a national 7-day waiting period, suppressor bans, a national permit to purchase, bans on private party sales and transfers, enhanced age restrictions, a national red flag law, bans on 3D printing and polymer 80s and things like that, and so many other items that I can't even think of them off the top of my head. Just think about any other gun control law that's ever existed, it's probably in this bill. So let's go through some of the things that's included in this bill, and then we need to talk about what you guys need to do, what you, the viewers, need to do to stop this bill. So first, there is this requirement where you would need to get a permit nationally at a national level, or maybe a state equivalent that you would have to obtain to be able to purchase firearms and ammunition going forward. The bill states that, except as otherwise provided in this section, it shall be unlawful for any individual who is not licensed under this section to knowingly purchase, acquire, or possess a firearm or ammunition. So this is a national permit that you would have to purchase firearms and ammunition, and this runs directly contrary to what the Supreme Court recently said in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin decision. To obtain this national permit, you will need to be at least 21 years of age, go through a written and range test, so there's going to be a test requirement. You would also need to go through a background check and a bunch of other requirements, along with also paying fees that are attached to getting this permit. You know, that alone, this national permit to purchase firearms and ammunition, that alone on its own would probably make this bill unconstitutional, does make this bill unconstitutional, and would warrant this bill being absolutely struck down. But that is only within the first few pages of this bill. There is so many other things that's included in this. Then they go on to push for the so-called universal background check. Essentially, this is simply a restriction on private party transactions. Under this bill, it will be required that all transfers will have to go through an FFL, and a background check will need to be run on the purchaser. This will also trigger the mandatory national 7-day waiting period. And of course, you will also still have to show that you have that national permit to purchase that is also going to be mandated through this bill. Now, since I mentioned that 7-day waiting period in this section of the bill, again, there is that mandatory 7-day waiting period. The bill will require that a mandatory 7-day waiting period is in place from the time that you purchase a firearm. You will have to wait 7 days, exactly 7 days to the minute before you take possession of that firearm, or I don't think it applies to the ammunition, but at least for the firearm. And again, that also would apply to these private party transactions. Essentially, they are copying what California did with their 10-day waiting period, but they're just simply going to make it 7 days at a national level. Then in the next section of the bill, it moves on to beef up the federal 922G sections of, domestic violence restraining orders and those types of prohibitions and other prohibitions under that section. What's interesting about this section is the fact that they would include this in the bill, especially when the Supreme Court has recently heard arguments and will rule on this upcoming year in the Rahimi case that deals directly with the domestic violence restraining order restrictions under federal law. The indication is that maybe the Supreme Court, might strike it down, might find it unconstitutional. We'll have to wait and see. But again, this is interesting that they would include additional language in this bill to try to beef up that section when it's directly in question right now up for Supreme Court review. The next section of the bill then goes on to increase the age to purchase all firearms and ammunition, and increases the age for all purchases to 21 years of age. But the tyrants are far from finished from including all the gun control in this bill. They are also introducing a national ban on so-called assault weapons, magazines, and also suppressors. For the rifle ban, in this specific language, they follow the California model, where there will be a ban on specific rifles, pistols, and shotguns that have specific accessories and configurations. For example, they define one of the so-called assault weapons, one of the variants of a so-called assault weapon, to include a semi-automatic centerfire rifle with a detachable magazine that has one offending feature, like a pistol grip, a forward grip, a collapsible stock, or even just a threaded barrel. Any one of those features on a traditional semi-automatic rifle would then make it prohibited, and the future sale of that item would be banned. Then they also have the classic magazine ban on magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. So right there is your national magazine ban. Think about the states like California that have these magazine capacity limitations that are being challenged, these bans on rifles like California. What they're doing is they're going to copy those models and try to just take it nationally. But then, as I mentioned, they go absolutely full tyrannical and even try to upend the NFA and the laws that we currently have in place on suppressors. This section states that if this bill were to pass, it would be unlawful for a person to import, sell, manufacture, transfer, or possess in or affecting interstate or foreign commerce a firearms silencer or firearms muffler. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, maybe that's just a prospective ban. Maybe they're going to grandfather in those suppressors that you already illegally own and have tax stamped and gone through the NFA process. Well, you would be wrong. Nope, they're not going to do that. Under this bill, they include a seizure and forfeiture language, and that's going to be a seizure and forfeiture of firearms silencers and firearms mufflers, or whatever they deem to be these so-called silencers, suppressors, whatever you want to call them. Now, like always, they try to fool people and say, well, maybe for the rifle bans and the magazine bans, that's only going to be a prospective ban. We're going to grandfather in some of these items. The bill states that they're going to allow you to keep those rifles and magazines that you already possess. They're going to be grandfathered in as long as you had those transferred to you if you were in possession of them before this bill is enacted. But we all know if a bill like this ever passes, it's only a matter of time before they also go after those grandfathered items. Now, with this section, you may be asking yourself, if this becomes a law, how will they actually know which rifles and magazines were in your possession prior to the ban? And how will they know which rifles and magazines were made post-ban? Well, this is also going to have a reporting requirement attached to it. And then the bill also includes a marking and identification requirement. It states that any rifle or magazine manufactured after this bill, once it goes into effect, those items will have to include a serial number and also some date identifiers so that they know what items were pre-ban and then what items were post-ban. Now, there's a lot more that's included in this bill, like a national red flag law, bans on polymer 80s, bans on 3D printed items, and just a lot more that's included in this. That national red flag law and a bunch of other things as well. I'm not going to get into all the minutia of this 281-page gun control, a wet dream essentially. It's just their fantasy about every single piece of the legislation they would ever want to pass. They just decided to throw it all in this one bill, threw everything at this, including the kitchen sink, and trying to maybe hope that something sticks out of this bill. Now, in reality, they don't have the votes to pass this national gun control law. They struggled to get that rifle magazine ban passed. It did not get, unanimous consent. That was struck down even just this last week. So something like this, I don't ever see passing. But, that's not going to stop them from trying. Even after they lost this last one, last week, all of a sudden they introduced this one as well, and they're just doubling down on this. I do want to warn everybody. I know a lot of times when this pops up, a lot of people, it never passed. But we have seen some things pass, in the past. We've seen national rifle and magazine bans. A lot of people overlook the fact that we've had a federal ban in the past. And then also we know that it just takes one incident for all of a sudden something like this to get momentum. Remember that after Uvalde, We had multiple rhinos in the House and Senate side with the Democrats to pass the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. That piece of anti-gun legislation has now led to the new ATF rule banning private party sales. They're targeting, the private party transactions. So again, we need to be vocal about this. We can't just sit on our hands and say it's never going to pass. We still have to be active on this. We have to contact our representatives. So that's the call to action. Contact your representatives. Let them know that you do not support this, that they need to shoot it down. And of course, if anything else develops, I will let you guys know. If you like this video and you like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. Regardless, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.